It's 1 o'clock. I'm going to admit everyone and just let them know that we're going to be starting in just a minute. Welcome, everyone. We will be starting in just a moment. Joe, the studio looks like everything is live and keeping that. You've kept it going all through this pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Yep, all by myself.
All right, it's 1 after, 2 after we're going to officially start. So welcome everyone who's just recently joined. We're just about to get started. And Allie, if you will admit folks, I guess from this point forward, feel free.
Sure.
All right, well, we are just about 2 after and about to get started. All right, well, welcome everyone. I'm Ryan Herbst, Chief Strategist at UnifiedCommunications.com, and I would like to welcome you to another one of our special online events. This one is focused on driving engagement in hybrid spaces. And I'm joined, as usual, by Joe Dalecki, Principal Program Manager Architect here at Unified Communications. And we have a special guest from Logitech, Josh Blalock, a Senior Solutions Architect and also a Microsoft MVP. Rockstar. Josh, thanks for joining us.
Ryan, Joe, thank you both for having me on today. I'm really looking forward to having this conversation.
Awesome. No, these are fun. And I'll tell you, I love, we are using Teams webinar, which is a much more casual feel. And this is relatively new technology. This is different. If you have watched webinars from us in the past, we have used Teams live events primarily, and we also do some really kind of fun stuff using some third-party tools. And but this one is it's refreshing. It feels just like a Teams meeting. It's got a fun kind of casual flavor. We just wanted, I guess, before we get started, to remind everyone that meeting chat is enabled. That's how you'll chat in your questions. We've reserved the last 10 to 15 minutes of this event for questions, so you could start chatting them in now. And I'm going to just share something quickly to help get us started. Yeah, so we've had many webinars and discussions around this concept of hybrid work and the impact that it's going to have, is already having on personal and shared spaces. And the data that's coming back is really interesting. And what is called, and we'll talk for a moment on what's called this kind of hybrid paradox that has emerged based on real empirical data. And so what's becoming very clear is that a overwhelming majority of employees are shouting from the rooftops that there are some good things about remote work and some things that they don't want to give up. The flexibility and ease with which they're joining meetings. There's some real goodness around the remote work side, and they want that to stay. At the same time, a similar percentage, majority of employees are also wanting and miss a lot of the in-person engagement and collaboration experiences that were possible when we got together as a group. And they want that to come back post-pandemic. They're also expecting less density when they get back in the office than what they had when they left. And so this is really, this is interesting. This is really at the heart of this kind of hybrid world that we spend so much time kind of talking about. I don't know that it could be more clear. And Satya Nadella recently just said that extreme flexibility is going to be the key to success for organizations, and it's really going to take this kind of new operating model to be successful in this next chapter of work, and we believe that wholeheartedly. So this is not our first discussion. We continue to kind of drill down into the mechanics and into some of the specifics of what hybrid really means, and how, as customers, you can, what should you be doing today and what can you be doing. We invited Logitech to join this continued discussion around this concept of hybrid work, because they have an array of products that were conceived during the pandemic and designed specifically to help organizations thrive in hybrid work. So we're excited again to have Josh with us. Let's dive in. So I think to start, certainly love your perspective on this, Josh, just around what is a hybrid shared space, and what does that mean to you? What does that mean to Logitech?
I think that's a perfect place to start, quite honestly, with a conversation like this, because hybrid, well, I think it's a very appropriate word for the type of meeting space and workplace that we're talking about now. The word is one of those that's begun to get almost to a point overused in the industry, right? You've got hybrid cloud situations. Hybrid as a term has been around long before hybrid meeting spaces came up. And so this is yet another hybrid thing to talk about, to maybe more aptly describe what we're talking about, but also could add some confusion to what we mean by hybrid. So defining that is super important. When it comes to the meeting space, and when I say meeting space, I'm not just talking about a physical space. I'm talking about where we collectively gather, virtually or physically, to meet and collaborate. It is going to be far more of a hybrid place moving forward. What I mean by that, what I think most mean by that, as they're wading into this, is a place in which before most of our workers would be either sitting at their desks or in conference rooms, and you kind of had an employee here or there that was your peripheral person on the edges, on the fringe. We got them into the meeting, great, but that was a side thought. Moving forward, we are going to see that shift a lot. We may even have the majority of people not in those rooms, or half and half, and people are going to be spread out, whether it's in the office, at home, sitting in a coffee shop eventually. A little more of that's starting to come back, right? So that's really what a hybrid space is going to be. The ability for these spaces to, for people to be able to join a meeting and collaborate on even footing, no matter where they're at, and having the technology to support each of those scenarios, whether it's a more personal level, a room level. That's really what I think of when I think of hybrid space.
Yeah, I cringe at the thought of having to use air quotes every time I say hybrid work, because it is so embedded and it is kind of overused, like you said. But it applies to so much more than just the space. It's much more about how we bring people together. And the slide that Ryan was showing, where what we miss most about the workspace is the human interaction, and how do we get that back using the technology we have to bring people together wherever they are, and make the meeting space just as equitable as the remote participants experience. So, yeah, I mean, I think hybrid applies to not just the meeting space, but I think, we'll see organizations struggle, I think, on the IT support side as well. They'll have hybrid support. And so, not to go down, open up another rabbit hole, but there's hybrid for everything, right? There's hybrid support for these spaces as well, too. So a lot to think about there.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to hybrid in the support angle, that opens up the conversation to different tools for managing all of your technology, your whole unified communication strategy. You're going to have to approach that in a different way than you traditionally would. You're going to have to think about asset tracking and monitoring and updating of firmware across a far less controlled environment than you previously had. So great point to the expansion of the hybrid term.
Right.
Yeah, there's no question, and that everything is changing. And from in terms of being successful in this next chapter, organizations that make commitments, and it's not just the technology. I think we know that. We're going to spend some time certainly today talking about the technology. It's a huge piece of the puzzle. But it's everything from management style to philosophy. The best and the brightest are demanding this flexibility, and so I think we just know this. You can see it. All of us kind of read the statistics, and folks that are quitting their jobs over kind of rigid policies in that world. And I think we, from an IT perspective, need to be able to support what will be this next generation of flexibility. And so, yeah, let's talk a little bit about what it means, I guess, how as it relates to physical spaces. What are some of the core considerations that customers should be thinking about to try to drive engagement for both remote and in-person attendees in shared spaces? And it's almost comical that pre-pandemic, we spent a lot of time thinking about video conferencing rooms and really worried about how to get remote folks to have a good meeting experience. And now I think we're mostly focused on and see the biggest challenge being how do we get the folks sitting in those shared spaces to have as good an experience as the folks that are not in the room. They're joining meetings easily, they see content easily, everybody's video is around the same size, and all of that is just working. And now how do we fold kind of shared spaces into the mix? And then how do we begin to get beyond just this concept of audio and video being kind of what we do in shared spaces? Like it's much more. It's how do we make productivity and so anyway, just love everybody's kind of thoughts here, because I think it's certainly the technology is a piece of it, but it has a lot more to do with that. The rooms, for example, the orientation and furniture and layout. What we left behind when people went home in March of 2020 was not environments that were engineered specifically with remote participants in mind. They may have been engineered to allow remote participants to join, but not to give them an experience of parity and not giving them kind of the same seat at the table. And so what does that kind of mean in terms of impact? And I certainly have some thoughts, but love to hear what you guys are thinking as well.
Yeah, there is, like you mentioned, there is certainly a lot of physical elements to thinking about that physical meeting room space, and the hardware is important and features are important. But at the end of the day, the experience is what it all needs to be about. When you can, as an end user, not even think about what hardware is sitting in the room or what you have to do when you walk in and just intuitively use the room, that's some of the more important pieces that come into play. But like you said, let's just kind of bullet point some of these things that you need to think about. You need to think about the size of the room in terms of square footage, certainly, but the number of people that are going to be in that room, or more importantly for this day and age, post-pandemic and coming out of pandemic, the proximity of those people in a room to each other. So our solutions need to not just be geared toward the right number of people in the room. They need to be smarter than that. They need to have the capabilities to count the people in the room, to eventually let people in that room know there's too many people sitting in this room. Please, someone maybe step outside, or some other gentle nudge right. There's a lot of things that are post or because of COVID that are becoming important. A lot of cool new features coming out from the Teams platform. Some have rolled out, some are rolling out, and the hardware to support those features is going to be a very important part of thinking about what that looks like. We're talking about the ability to cast your device to the screen in the room instead of physically touching the HDMI that the last 3 people touched and putting it into your machine, or instead of being able to come into the room and touch the screen that the last 3 people touched to say join meeting. It's just one touch, but still. Instead of having to do that, being able to walk in and say, Cortana, please join my meeting. A zero-touch experience, one in which we're being safe with the number of people in the room. Planning for that kind of stuff is a big deal right now, because that is one of the struggles that I hear often from IT managers, people thinking about these rooms. okay, we can break out the calculators. We can figure out how far away we need to have our mic pods. Do we put them in the ceiling? Do we put them in the table? How do we do our cable management? That's all stuff we can figure out. But beyond that, they're trying to figure out this kind of weird new area of, but how do we make sure people are comfortable in these rooms, right? And so that's kind of one of the big topics that has emerged as of late.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting. Just yesterday, Joe and I were on with a customer who was talking about their vision for hybrid work, and it was, I think, very forward thinking. Outside of the technology again, which everyone is kind of thinking about similar kind of core underlying technologies. But their concept was, people are going to we're going to give this flexibility. People will come to the office when they have a reason to come to the office, but those reasons can really vary. It could be that, I'm just looking to do some focused work and there's less, I just want to kind of shut out. I've got family and other things going on in the background at home. And so I just need a break. I want to come park at that little touchdown or hot desk station, something like that. That's certainly, I would say, a fairly, that's a universally kind of common concept that we're hearing. But and then there's other times that that this may be groups of folks, but I think their thought was it's not just about conference rooms. It could be a team that I want to bring the team in today because and maybe not everybody can come, but for those that can, we think that that's going to be a really there's some energy, there's some unique things that we know can only happen when we get there's a magic that happens when we get
there is. For sure. Yeah.
And so they have a variety of different space concepts. Some of them were, a bunch of kind of standing desks with some, interactive technology in the front, and still certainly supporting, remote folks as attached to that. I don't think anybody is imagining, any meetings likely that won't have at least one, remote participant on them. And so, but then there were others that were a little more kind of seated. Others were more designed to kind of get people standing up and creative. And the whole thing you could think of as just this whole collaboration experience. And you could walk in and pick that. I'm looking for kind of quiet. I'm looking for an environment to engage with remote audiences just for me personally. I'm looking for an environment for a small team to do an exercise together. I'm looking for an environment for a large team. But that whole space was being completely redesigned to support it.
I loved it. I think it was great. One thing that stood out to me was just the fact that they were designing the space with the idea of how do we make people want to come in to work here. They were still not forcing anybody to come to the office. Their policy was you can work from home as much as you want. But how do we now design a space that makes people want to come in and collaborate? And that was unique to me. That was one of the first times I've heard that. And I think that was one of the best things I'd heard to come out of that was, now, how do we think through what is going to make somebody want to come in? What do they need the most if they come into the office? What do they need out of that time? And so Ryan was talking about the variance of spaces. Each space designed with a different purpose in mind, a different feel, a different function in mind, but giving choices, giving variety, giving options. And that was one of the core things I thought was really good. So, yeah. Very cool stuff.
Flexibility.
I think their biggest concern was, if everybody starts coming into the office, how do we deal with the sound? All these spaces are going to be used. How do we then deal with the sound overlap from these spaces? And so that was going to be another challenge that, again, is unique to that type of space design. So all of these new ideas bring with them additional questions and additional things to solve for. So it's always going to be something to work through.
Yeah, your design considerations are going beyond the traditional, here's my small room, here's my medium room, here's my large room. You've got these new hybrid spaces of personal collab spaces or little huddle groups or maybe kind of open huddle. We had a very large customer in the last couple months that wanted kind of a proposal for different solutions that would fit. And I kid you not, this was probably a list of 20 or more different meeting types or meeting room type spaces that were not just large, medium. I mean, there were variations throughout there. Flexibility in your solution is going to be such a big thing moving forward. Not just flexibility with allowing your workers to do what they feel comfortable doing, but flexibility in the technology, how they're consuming these meetings, how they're interacting. You don't want to just say, okay, you got your small space, that's your meetup. You got your medium space, that's going to be a Rally Bar and Rally Plus for you need to be able to mix and match and have, like I said earlier, ceiling mounted mics. Maybe you have your center of room touch console is not center of room. Maybe it's mounted to a wall. There's all kinds of considerations for the room type and the comfort level of people using it that come into play when you're designing these rooms. You mentioned furniture earlier. That's another big one, right? Not all rooms are equal, and the furniture in the rooms greatly changes what you may or may not be able to do with your solution in that room. So many considerations. It's definitely one of those conversations to crack into with help. But these are all things that are different now than they were before COVID.
100%. Yeah.
And these are the conversations because it's very clear that the rooms that we left, they were created for face-to-face engagement. They were rectangular shaped rooms, and you sat across the table, and it's not just a matter of shoving a camera at the front of that room. You can. Right. But if we're really saying that we want remote participants to be full-fledged citizens and participants and to have similar experience, very often we're going to have to rethink that as well. And so that's likely going to that's going to be reduced capacity because we're going to be changing orientation and being more square than rectangular most of the time in rooms. We'll talk in a little bit around some of Microsoft's kind of future concepts that they've shared, and you can see some of that kind of vision coming to life. But that I would say square rooms being much more interesting than rectangular shaped rooms in general, and the furniture really having to support it. So let's talk maybe just shifting gears a little bit, but this is really in the same vein. Whiteboard. This has historically been one of those big part of the in-conference room experience has been whiteboarding. This has been one of the areas that remote participants always felt kind of disconnected from. And we know that there's certainly there's certainly digital whiteboard technology. There are very kind of exciting products like Surface Hub that are big pieces of Teams Room and Teams Room experience. But we also know there's still a lot of just traditional analog whiteboard out there, and it's unlikely that just a wand's going to wave and all that's going to disappear. I know that Logitech recently introduced a new product, Scribe, and so Josh, I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about why Logitech brought Scribe to market. But I think we all can, I think it's pretty natural for us to see that this hybrid is just not going to work if we're going to leave remote participants out of that ideation experience.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly correct. And I mean, Logitech has been involved with the what's called content camera scene and Microsoft Teams for quite a while. I would say we were actually kind of one of the first companies on the scene with cameras that were officially supported, certified for this capability in Teams. And so it gave us some early insights as to how we could better enable these rooms to make this experience more of an inclusive one for everyone, not just in the room and outside of the room. To your point, it's great to have a Surface Hub in a room. They're amazing devices. The amount of rooms across the world that have whiteboards in them and the cost associated with replacing those whiteboards with Surface Hubs, that's not going to happen anytime soon. And whiteboarding is a key part of collaborating. I mean, you have one in almost every conference room, and it has been difficult for those remote participants. So Logitech going beyond the earlier days of being able to support content cameras with the Brio or the C930E, they were great cameras, but then there were challenges that came about with mounting. Okay, well, how do we properly mount them? Where do we place that? What does the experience feel like of bringing the content into the meeting? And that thinking, that evolving, that letting things grow over time birthed the Logitech Scribe that we see on screen here. And aside from being just an aesthetically pleasing device, it is, I think, in my opinion, quite a nice looking piece of technology that sits right above your whiteboard. One of the unique differentiators about this, aside from the fact that it has AI and compute built into the device itself, is that little, in the screen you see here, that little purple button off to the side. That is a one-touch share button, right? So instead of having to go into your meeting room or on a Logitech tab, click, start sharing, and instead of doing that and picking your content camera, you literally, as a person in the room, walk up, one touch on that button on the side of the board, and boom, your whiteboard is being shared into the meeting. And there's a lot of flexibility with it. This thing has been built with all kinds of capabilities in terms of working with multiple surface types, supporting up to 6x4 whiteboards. It's quite a diverse tool that really evolves the content camera whiteboard sharing experience. So very exciting announcement for us in the last few weeks here. I'm really glad to see it out there. I'm glad to see the buzz that has generated around it. And I'm interested to see how it really does kind of change the whiteboard experience for users across the world. So
whiteboarding, I think, is it's cultural, right? I mean, it's part of the meeting. It's so integrated in how we get our ideas out of our head and visualize them in whatever form or fashion that we need to. And it's so vital that we're able to do that in whatever medium, whether it's digital or analog, that we're able to do that easily and effortlessly. And I always talk about how the technology in the room needs to just get out of the way. And I love the button that allows me to do that without having to walk back and forth, because it's anytime that you have to disengage from the meeting to do something to manage the meeting, that's going to break the flow. It's going to break the immersion. And so that button is going to definitely help with that staying immersed in the meeting, staying engaged, and the technology, help the technology just get out of the user's way. So I love that. Yeah.
It's the age-old problem that people had in conference rooms of walking into a room and having it take 5 to 10 minutes to get a meeting off the ground because there was just so many moving parts and pieces. They solved that with a one-touch join button, right? And that's great. But that problem then gets extended into different components of the meeting, like you said, where you've got to manage it. So taking that one-touch join, getting the technology out of the way, and letting the users feel like there is no education to this. I just know how to use this room. It's so simple to do. It's such an important part of moving forward. I think it has to be at the forefront of anyone designing solutions for this new meeting hybrid space. So,
no question. Let's talk about camera, because I think camera is becoming is increasingly an important part of this equation. I think and our expectations now in this hybrid world are changing for camera. It was, I think, because people are sitting at home and the adoption of video has just taken off in a huge way. Obviously, throughout pandemic, I think sitting at home and looking at a camera feed that is showing me a shared space where everyone looks small and really far away is maybe less exciting than it used to be. And so we're starting to get a lot of that feedback. You're certainly seeing there's just major developments happening in terms of camera intelligence. But I think the idea that we want folks that are in those shared spaces to appear to the remote participants in similar ways as other remote participants in terms of size and to be able to pick up on nuance and body language and nonverbal, all that stuff is super important. So I know Josh Logitech has introduced some new technology called Right Side 2, or has announced, I should say, some new technology. Right Side 2, and that's going to be coming later this year. It's attached to the Rally Bar and Rally Bar Mini products, but you talk a little bit about how it's going to work and kind of the why behind it.
Sure. I think the why behind it has kind of been touched on with what you said a moment ago, right? And that's that we had nobody in meeting rooms for such a long period of time that everybody got a devoted piece of screen real estate for their camera, and it felt more immersive, more inclusive, like you were all on equal footing. And as we start to migrate back to these offices, as you see, like in the picture here, we go from one clip of people all being around a table. Now imagine that being one participant in a meeting of 27 people, all with their cameras on. All the people in that room have this tiny little square that is not equal to everybody else in the room, right? And so it becomes difficult to make the people in the room now, ironically, feel as included on the screen as everybody else that gets their own video feed. And so RightSight 2 was, like you said, it was announced through a Microsoft blog a couple of weeks back. Great blog article that went and kind of highlighted this upcoming feature. This is where you actually get this graphic from, and the graphic does a great job of telling the story of how it solves for this problem. You kind of get a picture in a picture. And so the picture inside the picture still shows that conference room. So we get the sense that we've got a room full of people in a meeting, and that's good. That's good to know that people are together collaborating in our meeting space. There's value to knowing that. But the person in that room that is speaking and that should have the focus from that room in that moment, they get a second image that is over, behind that inset picture that focuses in on them so that you see the person talking more clearly. The focus is on them. You get context in both areas, not just the room, but the individual speaker. And so I'm really excited to see this come out later. It is one of those things that it's being solved for within software, within hardware. Microsoft's got some innovations along this same page that are upcoming as well. But this is coming, like you said, the Rally Bar Mini, using that AI viewfinder camera that sits beside the main camera on these devices. And I think this is going to be, as I saw a comment here over that described kind of the capabilities described, next level is what I think this is going to be. It's a cool capability, and I'm excited to see it come out.
Yeah, I think this spoils us a little bit.
Yeah.
As a presenter, as a meeting, organizer and leader, I think, this type of technology spoils us a little bit. We're so used to, navigating, I think, the difficulties of meeting presentation. And now I think, these tools just make everything so much simpler for us, and especially for myself too. So, yeah.
I love the fact that, I guess there have been technology, there's been technology in market around speaker tracking, but I think the evolution of this that is allowing not just an either or. These are kind of because it's great to see the room, and it's great to see individual participants, not having to make that kind of a mutually exclusive decision and not losing track. Because I think that's some of the feedback. We certainly had folks who loved the concepts of speaker tracking in the past, but there were others who felt like they kind of lost track of who else was in the room, and it was a different experience. And so I think these newer concepts are bringing kind of the best of both of those worlds, using AI to generate experiences that are natural. But I'm not losing sight that there are other folks other than that speaker in the room as well. Right.
That's the thing, right? You're giving the best of both views there in one. So great, awesome announcement. And again, that will be for folks interested in that. That's going to be for the Rally Bar and the Rally Bar Mini at this time. So keep an eye out for that later this year.
Great. So thought it'd be fun to talk a bit about recent Microsoft announcement. So Microsoft has announced a new content layout called Front Row. It was part of kind of a vision for the future of shared spaces. This is just an evolution of the Teams Room concept. It's not a new product that's going to ship. It's just coming in iterations to Teams Rooms. And this new layout, it really designed to just like the title of this webinar, to try to create more engaging experiences. And as we move beyond just audio and video in the room, we begin to bring content, and even more than that, you can see in what Microsoft is doing. They're bringing things like agenda and tasks and notes, and so this new layout, the way they've positioned video participants in this front row is designed to take and kind of get them eye level for those in the room, but then let's surround content with some fluid components that are things that folks on the remote side have access to as well. And again, like we said at the beginning of this thing, those are some of the challenges, and some of that today, it's not just about audio and video in the room. I mean, the folks that are sitting in the remote side of the meeting are actively participating in the chat, and they're sharing their reactions, and there's a lot more happening than just audio and video. And so bringing that into the room, along with content and an ability to interact and whiteboard, all of this really is it's kind of baseline for where we need to be to create this this true hybrid experience. So yeah, just wanted to get everybody's kind of thoughts and takes, and also to make sure that if there was confusion out there that this was kind of a net new product. It's not. I think those who have Logitech products and Teams rooms, today this is just going to be coming to you.
Right.
There are some learnings though. We talked about room size and shape and things like screens and orientation, and so you are seeing kind of more wingspan, kind of to do this in front of room. It's not that you can't do it with a single display. You could, but there's some real value in larger displays, or some of the visions for this that you see have a couple of short throw projectors, ultra short throw projectors involved. But yeah, just let me kind of toss this over to you, Josh and Joe, just for kind of thoughts. I'm super excited about this front row concept.
No, I am too. This is a great evolution of the meeting space. This goes back to the conversation earlier where we highlighted the term flexibility. And that has been a challenge for the room for some time. As we sit there in front of our laptop in a Teams meeting, you feel like you're kind of sitting in front of a cockpit these days. You've got all these controls. You can pull up your chat. You can pull up your attendee list. You can do a whole bunch of things to kind of drive your experience in that meeting. But the room, you don't get these sidebars and things in there. You're kind of a little more at the mercy of the layouts that are available for the room, which to this point, they've been expanding them, but it's like you said, it hasn't been the baseline that we want to see quite yet. I think this really gets to that baseline, and bringing chat into a room is huge. Going beyond chat with tasks and agenda, that's even bigger. But they really have put a lot of thought into this. The fact that you envision these rooms having a camera toward the bottom with your monitors, your TVs up high, and then bringing the video feed down to that level so that everybody's getting this eye-to-eye experience, that really helps a lot. Instead of talking to someone where it looks like you're talking to them like this, they're staring up at the wrong angle. That's just going to help. Yes, exactly. That helps a lot. But I love it. It certainly is best across two displays, but I love it that it's going to be available in a single display as well. We're not leaving out single display rooms. There are going to be lots of those. And so being able to have this experience in those rooms is going to be great as well. I love the dynamic flexibility that it brings on top of what we just discussed. And that's that if you're sharing content, we're going to take our cameras over to one screen and we're going to put the content on the other screen, and it's going to manage that for you. But if you're not sharing content, then it's going to make use of the entire real estate of both those screens and spread those video feeds across all of them. So this is a very welcome and evolution of the meeting space. To reiterate your point, not a new product. This is just coming soon, and Microsoft will release it. Whatever room system you happen to be in, it'll be there. But keep an eye out for this. This is an exciting, cool new way that rooms will be experienced.
Yeah, I definitely would. One of the coolest things, and I just had this idea pop in my head upon seeing this again, and I think we need to think about the meeting itself as this thing that's alive, right? This meeting it has life, and it has moving pieces and parts that help bring people together. The chat and the agenda. There's more intelligence here now as part of the meeting itself, just from the technology that helps to bring the meeting to life. It has life before the meeting. It has life during the meeting. It even continues after. Right. And so I think there's, if we're thinking about how to prepare for these new capabilities, I think it would be start thinking about the meeting as, each meeting as this living entity that, that we're giving the tools that it needs to function correctly and make the best use out of the technology we have. Like Ryan said, we're not changing any of the core hardware. We're just adding this new functionality, and to prepare for that, it really, I think we change our mindset a little bit and we start to think about meetings in a new way. So, yeah.
Well said. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Shifting gears. I guess we've talked a lot about the office side, the physical side of hybrid. Yeah. We certainly can't forget about the remote folks, and I think it's equally important one of the things that we have concerns about is putting lots of emphasis on shared spaces, only to have these, really exciting spaces create experiences that aren't great, because we still have folks on the remote side that are, generating, echo or background noise, or just either we're having a subpar experience. So, we know that we need to continue to evolve and harden the at-home or on-the-go experience. So maybe Josh, you can chat a little bit. And I think the other thing we know is it's not one size fits all. We've definitely kind of learned this from a work at home and on the go perspective. It's not just let's give them a cheap USB corded 2-ear headset. And it's certainly better than using PC mic and speakers. But in terms of where we're trying to land, investments in and some flexibility go a long way. So maybe you can chat about some things that have recently come from Logitech, or things on the horizon in terms of the personal side of the portfolio.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, forgive me for doing it again, but I'm going to go back to reiterating the word flexibility, and go back to that theme of everyone in the meeting space. There is this focus, and there should be, about making them all equal participants. So we want to make sure we have the right platform that enables that. We want to make sure we have the right tools and gear in rooms and in the office to enable that. But with so many of these participants that are now going to be staying at home or partially at home, that's a whole lot of gear and tools that you need to think about how you're going to manage those spaces and make sure they're set up to be equally represented in these meetings and in your daily collaborations within the company. And so the personal collab space is going to be just as important to think through as these rooms are. We've had a portfolio in the personal collab space for quite some time now that I think many are familiar with. There's the Brio, which has just been a fantastic personal collab camera. It does amazing things at the 4K streaming level, et cetera. And there's a number of other webcams that come underneath that portfolio, C930, C925, and there's several in there, right? And I think that those are going to continue to be important to have. The built-in webcams to laptops serve a purpose to a point. But when you start to think about people going home and working in spaces that they're not thinking about things like lighting, and they're not thinking about the acoustics in the room that they choose to sit in. These aren't things they're used to thinking about or having to make decisions about. They're used to a workspace that is set up for that. So helping them out by bringing tools to them that have things like right sight that will help illuminate their faces a little bit on the technology side and frame into where they are in the picture, things that'll help with the noise in the room. Those are going to be very important things to think through as an IT organization to make sure that not only are you giving them tools that they need, but you're thinking through things that they're not going to be thinking through themselves that's going to help. Going beyond that, we've had the Logitech Zone wireless and wired headsets, both certified for Teams for quite a while now. They're great headsets in and of themselves. But we did have, again, announced through a Microsoft blog post recently, a new entrant into the ear space, into your headset space. I say ear space rather than headset because it's not a headset, but these are going to be the first Teams certified true wireless earbuds. And then again, those were announced in a Microsoft post, and so I'd encourage people to go out to the Teams blog and check that out. They're going to be hitting the market in what I think is kind of a cool new fashion. They're going to have a couple different color options, one of them being the rose color, and that's kind of a new trendy look and feel for it. But they're geared towards that professional, those people at home that want to maintain an appearance that is not headset over their hair, messing up their hair, being cumbersome. It is discreet. It is a comfortable to wear experience. But that is bringing you that active noise canceling wireless capabilities, certified for Teams capability, without having to sacrifice what you may be wanting to preserve on your appearance on camera, right? So that was announced. There are other things in the personal collab space that, I'll just say the innovation doesn't stop there with Logitech. There are cool things coming later this year, so I would strongly encourage those that are planning out what your personal collab needs are going to look like across your entire IT org. Keep an eye out. There's some cool things on the horizon that I'm eager to see make those blog posts as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome, and definitely looking forward to some of the new hardware that you can't announce yet. But I will say that I've been very impressed with the quality of my Logitech Brio camera here. I get comments in almost every meeting about how sharp my picture is, and how did I get my picture so sharp? And I love pointing out that it's a Logitech Brio camera. So there's just some great technology there to help individual participants, help them sort of stand out and elevate their remote presence within a meeting, rather than just the traditional built-in speakers, microphones, and cameras. And I think all of that helps to improve the engagement of everybody else in the meeting. We all want to stand out, but we also want to just have a high quality experience. So I think it's a lot.
Yeah. And, that's the audio video side of it. And it goes beyond that, right? People at home are going to have a lot of needs when it comes to stuff that Logitech has been historically known for: the keyboards, the mice, those things sitting on your desktop that help make sure you're comfortable, that you're effective in what you're doing. Love it. But they're all a key part of the user's experience at home and making sure they're doing the best they can and collaborating the best they can. And going beyond that, the management of some of these devices, especially in the video collab space, is going to become very important for IT organizations moving forward. Right now, managing your devices across your rooms, your devices at work, home, that's a very broken up, disparate experience. Having a solution that is going to be able to manage those devices in a more single, cohesive manner, that's again one of those things that there's some cool innovations that I'd say keep an eye out for, that I think are going to make the lives much easier for IT pros out there that are looking to manage devices across the entire spectrum for their entire organization. So
that led right into kind of next question or next topic that we certainly we're with this hybrid. I don't know how many times we're going to count how many times we said hybrid on
we'll go back to the recording.
Making a drinking game out of it somewhere.
But we certainly, to your point, have moved past the firewall with the remote side and remote work, and increasing investments that are going into kind of hardening that experience. And as based on kind of the functionality and the pace of innovation, updates. You didn't necessarily update at something like a headset a lot in the early days, and these days there's new functionality, there's new integrations, there's reasons that we may want to touch those. There's also reasons that the advanced functionality we may want to enable for users that could mitigate background noise, or there's some value having some ability from an IT perspective to impact not just devices that sit inside our brick and mortar facilities, but devices outside becomes super important. Along with our ability to make sure these increasing number of collaborative spaces that are shared spaces inside our brick and mortar, that those are up and running, that we're not waiting for end users to tell us about issues, that we've got the right tooling for that. So let's talk about it for a moment. I think it's things like Teams rooms. We're big believers that there is no better technology on the market between Teams rooms and Surface Hub and this technology to support what we're doing from a collaborative perspective. But every technology can blip occasionally. It will happen to anything, and we don't want our alerting system to be our executive team when they walk into the room. And so the goal becomes, how do we minimize kind of impact of technology challenges on meetings? And that involves just having good tooling and good insights. And so, I think we did a event like this recently focused on, the Teams Room managed service and our UC Care for Teams Room premium offering. I'd encourage anybody listening to, that recording is out there for anybody who didn't see it. In addition, I think there's a kind of a more granular level of insight that can come through tools like Logitech Sync which we would consider to be complementary to something like Teams Room Premium, kind of part of the mix of tooling that we would want in our kind of tool chest. Maybe talk a little bit about Sync, Josh, and around what Logitech has done, and maybe some of the more kind of recent innovations that are coming, and how you guys are thinking about Sync's role moving forward.
Right. Like you said, there's a very complementary relationship between Sync and the Microsoft managed services capabilities for their devices, MTRP, right? And so the close relationship that exists there is one in which Sync offers what Sync is, for those that aren't that familiar in the first place. When we say Sync, there are two different ways that you can interact with it. It's a standalone application on your desktop to manage your local peripherals. And there's also a web portal that is a service that you can enroll your devices in for more enterprise level management. And that local application will enroll on up to the cloud service. So they work together, but the application is on a standalone piece as well as a cloud piece. And there is an API that sits behind this that Microsoft is able to leverage for a lot of what they're doing in premium. And then they build on top of that with some of their advanced AI services and things that they do throughout the Microsoft 365 world. It goes beyond just the device. It goes into security and other proactive types of things that they do with their service. Great service. And again, it's complementary. Then that API can also be leveraged beyond Logitech as well. It can be leveraged by partners that maybe want to offer a managed service to their customers down the road as well. So there's lots of things that can be done with the extensibility that is leveraged with the APIs. What the service itself does, you enroll the devices and you're managing firmware updates, you're managing OS updates for your rooms. You can group rooms into certain categories or groups so that they can be updated on different levels. So you can manage them from that standpoint. You do get a view of devices beyond Logitech devices. So that is also helpful for organizations that are going to have devices beyond the Logitech portfolio, although you're only able to really manage Logitech devices at this stage. But one of the really cool things that I think we've seen kind of evolve in this space is we're going to start seeing more devices beyond the rooms that are popping up into Sync and management capabilities around that will make IT administrators' lives a lot easier. And so I'm dancing on this because I'm one of these things. I'm not sure if I'm gonna have to go and ask for forgiveness after the fact, kind of thing. But there are some cool things on the horizon when it comes to that. When it comes to unifying the management experience of your devices, and so Sync really is this service that has been expanding well beyond where it started, reaching out to partners, to Microsoft, and offering an extra layer of support through ticketing, through alerting, through setting, when we mentioned earlier, counting the number of people in a room. You can set room limits and make sure that you understand how well those rooms are being leveraged. You get advanced analytics that'll say, these number of rooms were used, this many times throughout the month, or these are underutilized rooms, these are overutilized rooms, this too many people have been in these rooms. And it gives you forward planning capabilities as an IT org to be able to decide we're on the right track with our room strategy. Maybe we need to go back to the drawing board. Maybe we need more rooms. So there's a lot of that's baked into Sync.
Well, that's how you truly get the best out of your investment, right? Is when you know how it's being used. And you have that visibility, and you're able to manage it proactively. I love that keyword, proactive. Anything that you can do proactively as far as meeting rooms is a huge advantage over a reactive approach to support and break fix and troubleshooting, because it all goes back to that user experience. When a user has a bad experience, that is going to last with them so much longer than if they have a good experience. And
unfortunately,
yes. So minimizing those, bad experiences with a proactive approach is so key with any technology, but especially in a meeting room where it's in the forefront, right? It's center stage. The technology is so vital, and it's so vital.
And very little tolerance. Yeah, I don't know that I completely understand this, but yeah, I guess my cell phone drops a call occasionally. I don't throw it out the window. Right. One little blip in a meeting room, and we know what kind of impact that has. And so anything that we can do to to harden that experience, and again have the right kind of tooling to minimize meeting impact is great. What should, and by the way, anyone feel free, we've had lots of great comments. If you do have any questions, we have just a couple more minutes. We'll try to weave them in. Otherwise, we've got some great topics, and we'll keep rolling. But we are looking to see if anyone chimes in with something they'd like us to address. What should customers be doing right now? I do think this is a very unique moment, both from chip shortage to this just huge kind of a collective push in the enterprise to create these hybrid spaces, all around the same time. And so there have been kind of almost similar to the early days of the pandemic, we're dealing with some constraints on the supply side. I think because of that, our encouragement to customers is you really want, it doesn't mean that you have to, a lot of organizations' plans around return to work are still very fluid. Right. We're not saying, and some of them, are still making real estate decisions, but you should have a plan. You should have gone through some proof of concepts at this stage. You should be kind of understand the types of technologies and the types of spaces, and you should have some of that, hopefully deployed, and or you should be really hitting the gas, just depending on where you fit on this spectrum. But I'd love to get you guys going to chime in here. I think there's just no upside to waiting here, at least in the planning. And you could do the full scale mass deployment once you kind of lock some things in. But and the other side, I think, is you need a little bit of flexibility these days around. It could be the compute manufacturer. There could be we can't come in with too rigid of a standard at this moment, because that could kind of have us on the sidelines for a while.
There's a lot of intelligent data points right now for us to look at, to know how we should step forward at this point. I think that a very important lesson, I at least was learned in the moment, and I hope the lesson stuck with these organizations. But at the very beginning of the pandemic, where everybody shut down, people went home. I was working on a lot of voice projects at the time, and the amount of organizations that suddenly had to scramble, where they had kicked around the idea of maybe taking their PBX into the cloud for weeks, months, a couple of years. Suddenly, they needed their PBX in the cloud yesterday, and all at the same time. So
and there was a collaboration platform to
the
enable that. Yeah.
It just happened quickly, and so there was this this resounding, oh, I wish we had done this earlier. I wish we didn't, get backlogged and have. It was a very difficult lesson to learn for a lot. No one could have saw what was coming, right? But the whole point there is that there was a lot of people kicking around this idea, thinking about it, but it was a back burner item rather than an important part of their strategy moving forward. Right now, looking at that lesson learned, looking at the fact that we know there are chip shortages, we know there are supply chain issues far beyond chip shortages. There are supply chain issues in the grocery store still. There's all kinds of, read all of those signs, understand that while we're getting back into the workplace, and maybe you don't have a mandate right this second to have a strategy in place for this new hybrid environment, you do not want to be caught in a place a few months from now where suddenly your leadership has decided this is urgent, we need this rolled out now. Bummer, there is a giant back order of all the equipment that you want because of these supply issues, or whatever the case may be, whatever might creep up at that unforeseen moment. Now is the time where we understand these spaces, this meeting hybrid environment is a real environment. The need to collaborate effectively is real, and arriving at a solution that is going to be complete and flexible is not always something that you can do turnkey the next day. Right. So at least weighing your options, even if you're not planning on executing on, like you said, a full-blown project next week, weighing those options and understanding what you can do and what it's going to take when that time comes in the next couple of months or so, or whenever it does, that's key right now. So what does that mean? That means reaching out to folks like yourselves, folks like ourselves, and starting to have those conversations, understand what the capabilities are, what your requirements are, maybe learning what some of your requirements should be, and starting to plan for them. But
Yeah.
I think that's really where people need to be at this moment.
Well said. We are just about out of time. I'd like to say a very special thank you, Josh, for joining us. This has been a ton of fun. For anyone who's watching this either live or on demand, this is being recorded. We will send out a link to this. If there's others in your organization that you feel like would benefit from this, you can share it. The team here at Unified Communications, this is our world. We are super passionate about it. We would love to keep this conversation going with you. We're certainly available. We offer every time we do these types of sessions a complimentary hybrid device strategy session led by an architect here to any of the attendees. So please, you'll see an opportunity to sign up for that in our post-event follow-up. And with that, I'd just like to say a big thank you again. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Josh. And that's a wrap.
Yeah. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.